I just want all marketplace people to know, all marketplace believers, your work is sacred. You have a calling to be a part of the kingdom. You are not the second team. You're on the first team. And to understand that the marketplace is part of God's intent for the world, to embrace your job as an opportunity to honor God, love your neighbor, and proclaim the name of Jesus to the ends of the earth.
Thank you for joining Mercy Today. How do mercy and compassion break down barriers and change everything? How do they bring hope? Be inspired as our guests share about the life-changing, soul-impacting work through the ministry of Mercy, Inc. and its partners. Here's your host, Dr. Dan Pritchett.
Well, I'm very glad to welcome you to another episode of Mercy Today Radio. You know what we get to do on these shows? We get to tell the story of how compassion changes everything. And it really does. All of our shows, there are people and stories and projects and all kinds of things that God is doing around the world. And the compassion part is what really starts the cycle and starts the transformation that we are seeking to be a part of. So we get to tell the world about the work of Mercy, Inc. and its friends and partners, and another one for today. You know, when Christian people are choosing a career or an occupation, but when they're younger, they're in school, maybe high school or college or young adulthood, and they're thinking, some will feel called into ministry and some not. And so we might think, well, some go into ministry and some go into work or business. Well, wait a minute. What if work is ministry? What if you can have a business that helps fund ministry? Wouldn't that be like the ministry of supporting ministry? Well, that's our show for today. Today's episode is called, When is Making Money a High Calling? So, friend, I want to welcome you to the discussion, invite you to tune in, lean in, open your heart, and listen to the end, because even when we're done with the radio timing, we have more in our AfterWords, and we've got lots to talk about. We have a great guest today. His name is Erik Cooper. He is Zooming in, and he is the president of the Stone Table. Erik, I still don't think I quite understand what that is. Maybe that'll come out in our discussion. But as I said, Erik Cooper is the president of Stone Table and a friend of Mercy, Inc. And the name, again, of this episode is When is Making Money a High Calling? So, Erik, thank you so much for zooming in today, and welcome to Mercy Today Radio.
Well, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
I've looked around on your website, very impressed, a lot of good stuff there, and I just want to jump right into it because you're doing some amazing things. And before we help our listeners understand what it is that you do, would you mind telling us why you do it? That'll kind of set the framework. Why do you do what you do? And then we'll talk about some of the details.
Well, sure. Absolutely. What we do here at the Stone Table, and I will give you a little context on that as the conversation unfolds, but the Stone Table is really about awakening a gospel-redeemed marketplace to the mission of God in the world, or another catchphrase we love to use around here is we accelerate the Great Commission through the marketplace. I started out as a business guy that ended up taking kind of a beautiful but unexpected 12-year detour into full-time ministry. Now I find myself back in the marketplace. And so it kind of stemmed a little bit from not only what we do here, which I'll explain, but just being on both sides of the equation, being employed by a church and now being employed in the marketplace and understanding really the sacred calling of both of those things.
Yes.
And how God's people are really called to embrace their marketplace jobs, no matter what they are. Say whether you're a brain surgeon or you sweep floors at a local fast food restaurant, reconciled to Christ, all work is a sacred opportunity to worship God and love and serve your fellow man. And so
I love it.
That's what we do here. We generate money for missions work, Great Commission work around the world, global missions, which is really how we started through marketplace work. We have a real estate company here that we own, manage, and construct apartments, and we can get into that a little bit more. But that's really the driving force is to harness the marketplace for the mission of God in the world, both financially, the money we can create from the work, but also the work itself, we believe is actually part of God's redemption work in the world.
Excellent. And to apply all of that with what we were saying at the beginning, when you were working in the church, you were in ministry. When you are working in business, you are in ministry. Yeah. And I want our listeners to pick up on that. And I like your examples, whether you're a brain surgeon or sweep floors at a fast food restaurant. Whatever it is you do to the glory of God. And I like your reference. If you are a redeemed child of God, you are in ministry. God has a calling. He has a plan and a purpose, whatever, wherever, and with whomever you're doing it. And that's not only a challenge for me to think, oh, man, I gotta think about that when I go to work Monday. You know what I mean? How am I behaving? How am I performing? How am I doing? Because I'm not just sitting in a chair at the office. I'm in ministry. So anyway, I'm a preacher, so I can get off on just about anything. So
I got a little bit of that in me too, Dan.
No, yes. So, but we are communicators, whether it's in the pulpit or in front of a class or just going to work. Before we go further, Erik, I want to ask you this question, because you're going to say a lot of stuff that's going to resonate with people, and I think people are going to be looking at themselves and say, "Who, me? Really? Okay, well, maybe think about that." So tell us what it is you do, which we're going to learn about. Why is it important to you personally?
Yeah. Well, we grew up in a Great Commission-focused church. I like to tell people we kind of slow-baked in the Great Commission every Sunday, right? I mean, there was always a missionary sharing a story. We did big missions conventions, the flags of the nations, everything, right? So we grew up in that kind of an environment. My father was a preacher's kid. My grandfather pastored little churches all up and down the East Coast. And so my dad tells stories of, having to give up his bed for missionaries that were traveling through town. And so we just kind of slow baked in that. It was just part of who we are. And so my dad ended up feeling not a call to full-time ministry, but a call to the marketplace. And so he embraced really business in that way and in that context. And so that really, him showing me that you could engage and embrace ministry through the marketplace is really a huge part of that inspiration, for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I want to take it another step further. So, when you generate funds and make those available to mission and ministry organizations, and lives are changed. I understand it being a part of your DNA, all baked in, but does that do something for you when you hear reports from the field that, your funds were able to build an orphanage or a school or to make a significant difference? How does that resonate inside of you?
Oh, well, it's why we do what we do, right? So when you get those stories and when you hear, some of the fruit of the ministry and what we're able to do here, we're in the housing business, so we own, manage, and construct housing. So even we have 80 staff across the whole state of Indiana. We tell people, when you fix plumbing, when you repair a hole in the drywall, when you help somebody fill out a lease application and move into the apartments, like you're literally touching the ends of the earth with what you do. And that resonates, I think, with people, whether they're believers in Jesus or not.
Yeah. And I think what happens then is likely you are building relationships, nurturing those relationships, and what I call cultivating the heart soil. So if there is a receptivity or if there's an opportunity to plant that seed of the gospel in one of your renters or residents or tenants or in the mission field. So thank you. I think that's just so powerful that God is doing, whether it's in a pipe or whether it's in a mission school or something. So. Right. So tell us a little bit more. I read on your website you have, did I say 2,300 units or something that you own and manage? But tell us about the business part that helps you to raise the funds to ship off with prayers to the mission field.
Yeah, so we started almost 30 years ago. It was my father, a real estate developer friend of ours, and the retiring pastor of our church that recognized an opportunity in the affordable housing business. And our pastor was retiring from full-time ministry. He was going to go and spend his retirement doing fundraising for global missions work. My dad had been an entrepreneur, had been in all kinds of businesses, the nursing home business, restaurant business. He was kind of looking for his next opportunity. And this real estate friend of ours that was extremely connected with a lot of programs and things that were out there for housing really came to us with an opportunity. And so, we started this business almost 30 years ago, both to be sustainers of affordable housing. And then they said, hey, from day one, at the end of every year, half of our profits will go back into building the company. The other half will go right out the door to global missions through our pastor's organization. And that was the genesis, really. And so ever since then, we've slowly but surely built a company that is doing great things through housing.
And that is the living organism. I mean, you get up and you go to work and you know that all of your employees, all your residents, everything, that's all working together under that larger canopy of principle, and that is you are in straight business, in real estate. You're generating funds sent overseas to do mission work in other lands. Maybe we can hear a little bit about those lands and those projects and those things that you get reports about, things that your dollars are doing. And we're going to be right back with you, Erik, right after a break. So folks, don't go away. We're coming back.
Do you or someone you love need assisted living but are afraid you could never afford the cost? Glasswater Creek of Plainfield is for you. If you income and Medicaid qualify, you can move into Glasswater Creek for a fraction of the cost of market rate assisted living. Glasswater Creek of Plainfield is a game changer, bringing an affordable assisted living option to the west side of Indianapolis. Schedule your visit today at glasswaterplainfield.com or by calling 317-839-5808. That's 317-839-5808.
Here is Mercy Inc. Executive Director Doug Hoffman with another Mercy Minute.
It's been a pleasure really working with Mercy over the years as we look at making a difference in people's lives. We want to be like Jesus was, being the hands and feet of Jesus. And he fed people. He cared for people. Well, he healed people. He provided water for them, living water for them. That is what Mercy Inc. is trying to do across the world. As you listen to Mercy Today, the radio broadcast, in particular, you're going to hear life-changing stories of people that have impacted the people around the world. And that is for eternity, not just short term. It's not just having their belly full for one meal. It's about a life-changing experience for eternity.
I'd like to give a big thank you to the Covenant partners who make this show possible in the Indianapolis area. Thank you to the Ron Blue Trust, Wisdom for Wealth for Life. Find out more about this great partner on our website, MercyToday.global, and click on the Marketplace page.
I'm Brad Swinford with Salem Concrete Paving. It's a privilege to partner with Mercy Inc., who provides hope to people around the world by meeting critical needs and introducing people to Jesus. I know that through Mercy Inc., I'm investing in God's kingdom as they spread the love and gospel of Christ around the world. So please join me in supporting Mercy Inc. and Mercy Today Radio by praying or going to their website at MercyToday.global. Thank you.
Welcome back. We are talking with Erik Cooper. He is the president of the Stone Table. And we're exploring that and trying to understand what the Stone Table is all about. The title is, When is Making Money a High Calling? You probably already have a hint for where we're going with that because Erik is expounding that pretty clearly. So we're going to resume and we're going to get right back into what we were talking about, Erik. So what has been, would you say, the impact of your work? I mean, you're doing diligent things, you're creating capital, and you're sending it for missions. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the other side. When you send those dollars,
Sure.
What's happening? Where does it go? And what's being done with that money?
Yeah. So, the basic direction of what we do, CRF Affordable Housing, Community Reinvestment Foundation, CRF Affordable Housing is our affordable housing company. And then half of the profits now flow to the Stone Table, and the Stone Table handles all of our missions work, our overseas work, and then, any of the, the training, the resources, the encouragement that we create for, marketplace believers here in the States. And so a huge focus and a huge shift about 5 years ago in what we are doing overseas is in the arena of business as mission. So we went out and talked to some of the missions organizations that we work with regularly. Assemblies of God World Missions is a big one. Went out and talked to the leaders there and just asked them, what is God doing in the world and how is our organization uniquely designed to, connect with that?
Good.
And they told us, there's a huge, huge push towards unreached people group missions projects around the world. And one of the main ways now that missionaries and missions organizations are engaging in those areas is through business, entrepreneurship, business development, and really leveraging the marketplace. And that resonated with us really because of our DNA, right? I mean, here, who we are and what we do. We are a business that was started for missional purposes here in the States. And so if we can empower, invest in, and push forward the work of the ministry and the proclamation and the demonstration of Jesus Christ and the message of the gospel around the world through the marketplace, it just was a real, great connection for us. And so we've invested in business English schools, CrossFit gyms, travel and tourism companies, coffee shops and restaurants, things that allow missionaries to come into a community and to connect with that community through the marketplace. We believe the marketplace it's a relationship connector, right? You go in, you add value to people's lives, you meet a need through the marketplace, and it opens up relationship and people welcome those things into their community. So it's not really a bait and switch. It's understanding that the marketplace itself is part of that kingdom presence.
Yes.
And then through that, we get the opportunity to demonstrate the gospel and proclaim the gospel.
Yeah.
And so we've been able to do that around the world, and it's thrilling for us. It's one of our.
So if I hear you right, then your funding would go toward establishing or at least beginning a business in another country that is intentionally placed there, planted there, designed to build relationships. These are Christian entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so they are
missionaries. Yeah. Yeah.
So they have people coming into their coffee shop, and it creates the opportunity for relationships. And that's the key. That's the key to the transmission of the gospel, right? I mean, people, I'll say it this way. Nobody goes to heaven because their friend was a nice person, right? And so there has to be an engagement. There has to be a way to connect. And then you cultivate that heart soil by pouring a good cup of coffee and coming by and see if you need a refill and adding another napkin or whatever it could be. And then you have opportunities. There's a relationship that's developing. Wow. I mean, we do that here, but for you to have the vision of creating capital for those sort of business investments, and then you have people who are there bringing the message, the love and truth of Jesus across that bridge to planting and cultivating the soil and the seed.
I mean, we believe really the marketplace gives us an opportunity to fulfill both the Great Commandment and the Great Commission.
Yeah.
And that's whether you're here, in Western culture context, you're in the Arab world, you're in China, right? I mean, you get up and you go to work every day. The work of your hands is an opportunity. We like to reshape it through this lens, right? Yeah. To honor God and love your neighbor, right? And through those relationships, it's an opportunity to both display and proclaim and foster gospel conversations. Yes. As the gospel has transformed us and the work that we do and the reason that we do the work, it overflows into, gospel conversations that can point people to Christ.
That is beautiful. I think a lot of people in, church-connected, faith-based people in the U.S. might think, okay, well, I'm going to send some money to missions. They might think, well, it's going to be a Bible school or it's going to be a missionary who's going to ride a bike from village to village and preach the gospel. That's all good and all wonderful and needed, but that's not what you're doing.
Right.
For you, the transmission of the gospel and the life-changing power is coming in the context of serving people with a business.
Right.
I love that. And I just want to make sure it's some of these things, because I'm not a business guy. I've been in the ministry of ministry. You've been in the ministry of business. So I don't think like a business guy. I think like a pastor. Well, by golly, that's because I am one. So So I'm sure that you have heard reports back from the field. Maybe you could tip a little bit our way with some stories of some changed lives that have been affected because of your involvement in the business as mission.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one that sticks out to me is recent. I was there to see it with my own eyes. Last year, I was able to travel to an area of the world, I'll leave vague, only for the safety of the people there. And that's one of the issues that I have is I've got all these great stories and I have to be very careful about how I share them, but we were on the ground there with the team, and this is a business English school that is planted in an area of the world that's exclusively Islamic. Yeah. And, no churches, no known believers in this area. And when we got there, the missions team that actually runs this business English school that has taught literally hundreds of local students business. This is a touristy area. So if they learn English, they really can move up the socioeconomic ladder. The school employs locals. I mean, the community really loves it. And they love the fact that they're American, expats that are there. They love learning English from Americans or from Europeans, people who it's their native language. So we were there, and the team said, we got something really special for you. And that night they took us down to the ocean, and one of the students was baptized. It was the first known convert for the first church in this particular area. Wow. And it was the result of a business. It was a business plant, right? The church was planted through a local business, and we got to celebrate it that night. In fact, you may even be able to see it up behind me here. I think it's right there if you're on the video. It was the picture of the man coming up out of the water. Yeah. We wept with them and celebrated with them, and it was quite overwhelming. So, we have stories like that. We're also hearing, in Asia, we have areas that are completely inaccessible to Christian missionaries. Right. But because of coffee shops or restaurants, the restaurant owners are allowed to now go up into these remote villages where they can harvest their supplies and their coffee beans, and the business transaction opens up access that traditional missionary methodology would never be able to open up. And so it's a beautiful mechanism. I mean, it's a huge part of what we do here. It's not exclusively what we do, but those are the kinds of stories that we see happening through the marketplace. And I think we just need to help believers, whether they're here or overseas, understand that the marketplace is part of God's missional intent for the world. He created work. Work was created before the fall. Yeah. Work was God's idea. Sin has marred it, but we need to re-embrace this as believers and understand, whether it's here in the States or to the ends of the earth, the marketplace is part of God's missional mechanism in the world today.
Very well said. I'm imagining that you're on the plane flight home from some of these exploration trips, and you're saying, you know what, we're doing the right thing. Let's go do it some more, right? Yeah. And because you're blessed to see the fruit and the results, and I'm sure that you cannot see it all. And so there's a whole lot more. What you visualize maybe, or what you can actually see, might just be the tip of a very big iceberg that you have the privilege of being a part of. God bless you. So, Erik, we're going to have to wind down the radio portion here for our listeners who are listening on air real time. We're going to come to a close, but I do want you to go to MercyToday.global, because Erik and I are going to chat a little bit longer, and I want him to tell us about the word collapse. And that might sound like bad news, but it is really good news. I watched a video, Erik, for New Year, and he's quoting a pastor, makes a beautiful application of it. So listen for the word collapse on the AfterWords. So listener, I'm just glad that you're with us today, and whether you're listening in one of the cities where we are broadcast, or whether you're listening to the podcast, I'm happy to have you along. We've been talking to Erik Cooper, the president of the Stone Table. The name of the episode is "When is Making Money a High Calling?" Erik, you've done a great job of helping us understand that. So, Erik, I just want to thank you for zooming in, for sharing your heart with us. Do you have any concluding words for the radio portion? Anything that you could just leave us with, a sentence or two?
Well, I just want all marketplace people to know, all marketplace believers, your work is sacred. You have a calling to be a part of the kingdom. You are not the second team. You're on the first team. And to understand that the marketplace is part of God's intent for the world, to embrace your job as an opportunity to honor God, love your neighbor, and proclaim the name of Jesus to the ends of the earth.
I love it. Beautifully said. So, listener, there you go. I want you to go to our website, MercyToday.global. You can hear this full podcast. We have other things there. You can hear the AfterWords and all of our shows. We are heard around the clock and around the world. We've been talking to Erik Cooper with The Stone Table, When Making Money is a High Calling. Erik, thank you so much for zooming in today, and God bless you in your ongoing work.
We'll be back with more Mercy Today right after this. Here is Mercy Inc. Executive Director Doug Hoffman with another Mercy Minute.
We're traveling across Africa, working with a project called Shalom Africa. And as we travel, you see many people walking. You see many people, some people have bicycles, some have motorcycles, some are riding on the overcrowded buses, but it's very difficult to get around. We work with a group called Village Church Planners. And those village church planners are responsible for a certain area. And I was talking to one the other day, and he was asking for a bicycle because his one church he's working in is 6 miles away from where he lives. 6 miles walking is a long walk. He said, if I could have a bicycle, I could get there in a third the time, and that means I could go to another 6 miles away and plant another church. Please give me a bicycle. This is Doug Hoffman, Executive Director for Mercy Inc. I want to thank you for listening to Mercy Today.
So I really enjoyed talking to Erik. He's coming from Indiana, but his reach by God's design and enabling is literally around the world. And if you have questions about today's topic or want to get in touch with the Stone Table or Erik himself, go to our website. Use that as your conduit. We consider that a funnel. So you just go to our contact page, tell us what you'd like to know or questions or like to connect with Erik directly. Go to our contact form and fill that out. I want to thank you for listening today. This is Mercy Today Radio, telling the story of how compassion changes everything. And so until next time, may God help you be a part of what He is doing in our world today. Join us on the show again. Get our podcast. Sign up. We'll be in your inbox every week with a great show. God bless you, my friend, and we're saying goodbye for now. I'm just really delighted that we're able to go to multiple countries and continents around the world. And as we bring these stories of what God is doing, and He is up to something, I'm guessing that most listeners, if you're a middle-class American, just getting up, going to work, getting up Sunday, going to church, you probably have no idea of all the things that God is doing around the world, using His servants in business and in ministry, and we switch those and combine them because business is ministry. That's the thing that we're trying to put together here for you. Well, welcome to the AfterWords portion of this show. We are talking with Erik Cooper and The Stone Table. I keep saying that, and we're going to hear what that means and where that came from. But the title for today's episode is When is Making Money a High Calling? So let's get right into that, Erik. I have a question down that says, well, no, that's a different question. Why don't we start with that? Where did you get that name? What does it mean? How can we kind of learn something about what you do by the name of your business?
Yeah. Well, when we launched the Stone Table, really it was in 2015. I mentioned earlier in the interview that my former pastor had started a missions organization. And that was our partner really for almost 25 years. And he is 96 years old today. Wow. Still an amazing man. He and his wife are still married, still live on their own. In fact, until recently, he was still traveling. I mean, he'd been in Spain. And I teased him when he finally said, "Hey, I need to pass the baton." He was about 90. And I said, "You're going to outlive me. Why are you passing the baton?" Right? I mean, it's just, he's an amazing,
hold on to it.
an amazing man.
Yeah.
But we wanted to kind of reboot in 2015. And so basically we took the baton from him and we said, well, we're going to launch our own 501c3 to start handling the missions work that we do. What should we name it? And, we wanted to be in the space. We wanted to tell a story without being overt. And we've seen a number of our missionary friends do that with the names of their businesses, mission businesses. They mean something to them, but they don't necessarily mean things to, the people that are there in the culture. So I'm a big C.S. Lewis fan. And if you read The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe,
yep,
the location of Aslan's death and resurrection is called.
Oh, yeah.
So we wanted to remind ourselves, when you step into business as mission, there's a whole lot of different ways that people approach that. And they're beautiful ways, right? That, business for transformation, even, what I would call non-Christian or secular people are seeing that the marketplace can renew, communities, and they're seeing the beauty that can be created through the marketplace.
Right.
And we just wanted to make sure we differentiated ourselves in one way. And that was that everything we did and everything we do is going to lead towards the proclamation of the gospel. It's going to be rooted in the gospel, and it's going to lead to the proclamation of the gospel. And so, we say, missions does good in the world, but it's not solely about doing good. It's about doing, about embodying the gospel and proclaiming the name of Jesus. And so we wanted a name that kind of reminded us subtly. I mean, people out in just culture that see it, they're like, wow, that's kind of regal and noble. And, we say tables are gathering places, right? And the Stone Table is a gospel gathering place. But we wanted to remind ourselves that the death and resurrection of Jesus is really the driving force of everything we do. So that's
that
where
is
the name
deep. That is really deep. I love that. No, seriously.
Yeah.
I love that. And it's so powerfully important because I'm thinking, Erik, that when a guy gets up, he's running a business, he gets up, he's got his to-do list, his phone calls to make, emails, he's got to talk to vendors and employees and suppliers and, do marketing and all that stuff. Once in a while, he needs to just slow down and say, you know what? If I'm a child of God, he can use this ministry for doing some really great things, and it's more than about the coffee or about the sweeping or about whatever it is. And you've brought that to us in that way. I love that. And so how does the fruit confirm your mission? How is it? And I have a question in my mind. I'll just say that I'm thinking about it, and if you want to answer it, okay. When I talk about fruit, sometimes fruit is measured, and so I'm thinking dollars. So what kind of dollars does your activity, business activity, create for mission, where you do that starting of businesses for the purpose of building relationships and all that? What are you turning to send to missions? Is that something? I'm just thinking about that.
Like today, and it's funny, the housing company, the board of the housing company committed half of the profits to mission.
Yeah.
For the first 5 years, it wasn't hard to have, $20, right? I mean, it's like half of zero is a really easy calculation, So, but then as things began to build, the numbers got bigger and bigger. And then really in 2014, 2015, we started bringing in partners. And so what we would do is leverage whatever dollars that we had, and we'd bring in church partners, we'd bring in other business partners, we put out matching funds. And then, so I think all said, life to date, and really the first 10 years, the numbers weren't huge, but I think we may have crossed the $11 or $12 million mark this year as far as what we've been able to generate, both through the business and through, now in these last few years, our partners. And so, and in the early years, you mentioned earlier, building Bible schools and Bible colleges, and we were a huge part of that. Back in my former pastor was a huge believer in training indigenous pastors, and we love that. I mean, we love and are proud that we were a part of that type of ministry. And we don't exclusively do business as mission today. A couple of our biggest projects have been with some anti-sex trafficking work that we've been able to do. But even with that, they're doing job training, and they're retraining these women to get out into the marketplace. And so that's kind of the thread that ties it all together. But yeah, it's hard to quantify some days, but we've been blessed to be able to generate those kinds of dollars for missions.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I just wonder, and I'm being a little sarcastic, I wonder if God sees what you're doing and blesses your business so that more can be put out there for missions and all the other good stuff. What's the chance of that?
Well, I hope I'm counting on it,
Exactly.
because I'm not that bright. I'll just tell you, as I take the baton and
Right.
take this into the next generation.
Yeah.
If God's not walking alongside of us here, I don't want to go. And we've had some dark nights of the soul. I don't want to just paint a beautiful picture like this is just hey, well, you do it for God and you never struggle and you never suffer.
Right.
I don't think even Scripture shows us a different picture
Exactly.
than that, right?
Yep.
And even recently, kind of a long story, but even coronavirus, what's happened this year with COVID, we were right in the lease up of a brand new assisted living facility, and it just completely shut things down. And really, some nights of pacing the floor and wondering, how it was all going to work out. And in some ways it still is. But what I love about what we do, and I don't think this is just our story. I think this could be every marketplace believer story. Was when we start to meet these things in these difficult seasons and circumstances, we can go to God and say, "Look, God, this is yours. This is your asset. It's not mine."
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, just show me how to steward through this difficult season, because at the end of the day, it belongs to you. It doesn't belong to me. I mean, unfortunately for my kids, the profits we make don't go into a trust fund for them. I don't think they know that yet, but no, they do. These dollars go to the work of God in the world. And I think in that way, you can put those moments back in God's lap and say, Lord, if suffering is where you're taking us, if struggle is where you're taking us, this is all yours. It belongs to you. And just show us how to walk and steward this moment to the glory of God.
Yeah.
And so yes, I believe the Lord has blessed us, and we've seen him be faithful over and over again. And you just kind of hang on for the ride some days.
Yeah. Oh, beautifully said. So as we finish up here, I would like to invite you to speak to, let's say, maybe 3 different people. Okay. First, I'd like you to speak to the business person. So, back to the coffee shop or the sweeping, or the guy gets up and goes to work, or he's running a business. What would you say to him in the context of business as mission and having a higher calling and a higher purpose for his business? I mean, he's going to tie his tie a little differently after you talk to him, or he's going to have a little bit different thoughts on the way to work or on the way after, how he talks to his fellow workers or his employees or his employers. I'm kind of making a long question here, but talk to the worker or the business person in the context of the principles you're talking about. What would you say to them?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is we have to understand the story that we're a part of, and the world, especially Western culture today, 21st century Western culture, postmodern culture. I'm the center of my own story, right? I'm the author. Happiness and prosperity are whatever you want to say. Those are my objectives, and I'm the center of the story. And if you're a believer, we even see this in the church, right? It's like, well, okay, that's still my story, but I need to figure out how to bring a little bit of God into that story.
Well said.
I think that's a recipe for misery. If you're in the marketplace, or you're a business owner, you're an employee, first thing you have to do is flip the script. Okay. You have to understand that we are not the central actors in a story we're writing about ourselves, that we have been invited into this grand narrative that God has been telling really since the beginning of time. And it's the meta narrative of Scripture, right? Genesis to Revelation, creation, fall, redemption, restoration. This is the story. Our work, the work of our hands, is part of. So I would say to you, first and foremost, flip the script, reimagine your work through that storyline, that every day we get the opportunity to, and we said this, to go to work, to worship God, to love our fellow man, to serve our fellow man, and to proclaim the name of Jesus wherever we can to the ends of the earth. I think that is the kind of gospel-fueled meaning that so many marketplace believers are missing, because it's like, well, I didn't get the sacred call. So I'm just kind of trudging away here, trying to make ends meet, making a few bucks that I can give to, the church or to ministry, and hanging on till I get, to fly up into heaven, sit on my cloud and play my harp all day. Right. I mean, that's a pretty meaningless reality.
But I go to church and sing in the choir.
Yeah. Well, and all those things are good. Right. But to understand that, like, we're a part of this grand storyline of redemption and restoration. And we get a chance to reach into that future kingdom and pull a little bit of it back into the present through the work of our hands. And that gives eternal meaning to even some of the most menial tasks. I wish I would have understood this in some of my early marketplace jobs, because I struggled, I struggled with meaning. And I think a lot of people do.
Beautifully said. Thank you. Next person I'd like you to talk to is the pastor. So he's got 50 people or 500 people. He can have an amazing impact and an influence in this whole thing that you're talking about. All of life has purpose and meaning. Every day is an opportunity to live out the gospel and to touch lives, to plant seeds, to cultivate soil, all of that. How can a pastor provide that kind of leadership, either for his lay people who are workers or people who are running businesses? We're going back to the whole business as mission. How can he lead them? How can he show them by example? How can he inspire them to have that exact same framework that you just eloquently described?
Well, I think, some of my dearest friends in the world are pastors, and, I love the local church. And so, I always tell people, what we do here at the Stone Table is not about, elevating the marketplace to the detriment of the work of the local church. I mean, the church is God's mechanism, right? And so, we love the church, we love our pastors, and we want to serve under them, really, is what we do. We're not competing with the church when we speak in these terms. But, it was interesting. I had a dear pastor friend of mine. He invited me to speak a few years back. And when he introduced me, he was doing a whole series, a 3-week series, and he wanted me to kick it off on faith in the marketplace. And when he introduced me, he said, "I want to apologize to you as your pastor." He said, "Because in 20 years of being your pastor, it never even occurred to me," was what he said. Never even occurred to me to talk about where you spend 50% of your waking hours.
Yeah.
Never even occurred to me. And so I guess my encouragement to pastors would be to understand the sacredness of the marketplace and the opportunity the people in your pews have each and every day to embody and live out the gospel through the work of their hands, and to encourage that, to reframe people's work through the lens of the gospel. Is one of the greatest gifts that you can give them. And that's not to say we don't want them singing in the choir. We don't want them, parking cars or ushering or working in kids ministry. It's not an either or, but it's understanding that when you put gospel meaning behind the work of people's hands, a kingdom combustion starts to happen that will blow your minds. And so that would be my encouragement to pastors.
Thank you. I have a friend that says, "I am an ambassador of the Lord Jesus Christ, temporarily, cleverly disguised as an accountant."
That's awesome. Even accountants. And I have an accounting degree. I worked 2 years in public accounting. When I got out of school, it was the worst 2 years of my life. I tell people I'm a recovering accountant. But you're right, though. I mean, I think if I would have had a different perspective in those early years, it would have reframed the way I saw my work every day.
Yeah. Okay, one last person for you to talk to. Talk to the parent. You got young kids at home, you got high schoolers, you got college, my kids are adults, but talk to the parent about the things that you're bringing forth for us today.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think about this with my own kids. I have a 22-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 15-year-old. And, I want to shape this well for them. And so I guess I would just encourage parents to help your kids begin to think about their lives within the context of a greater story. Our social media, my kids love TikTok and Instagram and all of these things. And they're they're being catechized by the world in essence.
Yep.
And this is one of the things that terrifies me. I lay awake at night, and I've told my kids, I said, I can't shelter you from this, but I have to teach you how to live in the midst of it. Right. And so I think, for parents, I would just encourage you to help your kids understand that there is a greater story than the one the world is telling. There's a greater story than your happiness being the ultimate achievement in this world. Amen. The question we should be asking our kids is, how do we reframe our futures within the context of God's great story?
That is a challenge, isn't it, in the midst of our culture? They are being catechized. That's kind of a preacher's word, a church word, but it's exactly right. They are being trained. They're being taught. They're being shaped and formed. We have to get in the way there. We have to get in the middle of that and be proactive. All right, Erik, we have gone on a ways, and our listeners have been just glued to their phone or their computer speaker or their car, whatever. Here's the last thing. When I watched that video and you were quoting the pastor about the word collapse, that's all I'm going to say because you say it so well. Let's close with that. Tell us about the collapse story.
Well, in fairness, it was Pastor Jack Miller who passed away back in the 90s. He was a Presbyterian pastor that I love some of his devotionals, but he said it so well. He said, as we come into New Year's, right, we always think about, resolutions, things we want to change, things we want to do better. And he said, my only resolution every year is to collapse more fully on Christ. I trust in Jesus' resolve, not my own. And that is a phrase that I have carried forward. And I love that word. You said collapse. I mean, it's a great image, right? Of just realizing that nothing we do in and of ourselves is going to be enough. And so when we collapse on Christ, that's in our weakness, that's actually where our strength is rooted. And our dependence on him, the smartest, wisest, strongest thing you could do as a believer is to collapse more fully on Jesus this year and watch the fruit that grows up out of our lives. Beautiful. When we stop striving and start trusting.
Yeah. Beautifully said. That takes me to Paul kind of wrapping up his ministry and talking about how he, the old word is entreated or asked or begged the Lord to take this thorn of the flesh away. And so he probably said, well, God, I could serve you much better if you would take this thing away. If you would just heal me or take that away, I could be stronger and I could serve you better and more fruit for the kingdom. And Jesus says, when you are weak, then I am strong. And you want to be strong in my strength and not your own. That's collapsing. That's surrender. That's like giving it all up. Say, I got nothing. I got nothing except, Lord, what you provide and how you will work in and through that. So we're going to collapse this show. What do you think? Thank you, Erik. This has been fantastic. And I'm getting thumbs up in the studio here. Everybody loves it. Next time I come to Greenwood, I'm going to look you up and have one of those cups of coffee or something.
Please do. Give me a call.
Thanks, brother. God bless you.